The blue glow from Jenna's phone was becoming as predictable as her lies. Every night at 11:15, like some twisted digital prayer, she'd curl up on her side of our king-size bed and start giggling at text messages like a teenager with her first crush. "Who's texting this late?" I asked, knowing the answer would be another variation of the same rehearsed bullshit. "Just Chad, helping me figure out the insurance stuff from the fender bender." She tilted the screen away from me with the practiced ease of a poker player protecting her cards. "You know how confusing all that paperwork gets." Chad Mallory, our supposed best friend for the past 8 years. The guy who'd been my groomsman, who'd helped me move furniture when we bought this house, who'd cried actual tears when his father died and I'd driven him to the funeral home at 3 a.m. Now he was texting my wife every night, and she was giggling like he was telling her the funniest jokes in the world. Since when do insurance claims require 40-minute phone conversations? I rolled over, pretending to adjust my pillow while watching her reflection in the bedroom window. And why does he need to call after 11 every single night? "Nick, you're being paranoid." Jenna's voice carried that practiced patience she used when explaining simple concepts to difficult clients at her PR firm. "Chad's just being a good friend. He knows I stress about this stuff, and he's helping me understand the process." "The process?" "Right. The process of what, exactly?" Because I'd handled insurance claims before, and they'd never required me to lock myself in the bathroom for whispered conversations that made me laugh so hard I snorted. "I'm not being paranoid. I'm being observant. There's a difference." She sighed, the kind of theatrical exhale she'd perfected during our 12 years of marriage. "Your jealousy is showing, and it's not attractive." Jealousy, the word she'd been throwing around for the past 3 months, ever since Chad had appointed himself her personal chauffeur and emotional support system. According to Jenna, I was jealous of their friendship, jealous that she had someone who really listened to her problems, jealous that Chad was more emotionally available than I was. Maybe she was right. Maybe jealousy was just love with a bad hangover, and I'd been nursing this particular headache for months. But as I watched her thumb dancing across the screen, typing responses with the kind of enthusiasm she hadn't shown for our conversations in years, I couldn't shake the feeling that my jealousy was the least of our problems. "I'm going to grab some water," I said, climbing out of bed. Mm-hmm. She didn't look up from her phone. Downstairs in our kitchen, I stood at the sink and stared out at our suburban street, Maple Grove Lane, where everyone knew everyone else's business, where Mrs. Dairy next door could tell you what time each neighbor got their mail and what they were wearing when they got it, where secrets were supposed to be impossible to keep, except Jenna was keeping one. I could feel it in my bones the way you feel a storm coming. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Frank, my head mechanic at the restoration shop. "Working late on the '67 Mustang. This thing's going to be beautiful when we're done. How's the home front?" Frank had been asking about the home front a lot lately. He'd noticed the change in my mood, the way I'd been throwing myself into work, staying at the shop until 9 or 10 most nights. Frank was good people, the kind of guy who could rebuild a transmission with his eyes closed and spot bullshit from 3 counties away. "Home front's complicated," I texted back. "Want to talk about it over coffee tomorrow? I've got some ideas about that surveillance system you asked about." The surveillance system. 3 weeks ago, I'd asked Frank about security cameras for the shop, but we'd ended up talking about home security systems instead. Frank's brother-in-law worked for a tech company that specialized in GPS tracking and digital surveillance. Not the kind of thing you'd normally need in a marriage, unless your marriage was turning into a crime scene. "Yeah, let's talk tomorrow." I climbed back upstairs, where Jenna was still glued to her phone, still giggling at whatever Chad was telling her about insurance paperwork at midnight on a Tuesday. "Everything okay down there?" she asked without looking up. "Just Frank texting about work stuff." Chad says the insurance adjuster wants to meet Thursday morning. He's going to drive me since you'll be busy at the shop." Of course he was. Chad had been driving Jenna everywhere for the past month. To the grocery store, to her doctor's appointments, to her book club meetings. Always with the same explanation. It was safer this way. Easier. More convenient. Never mind that I'd been driving her places for 12 years without incident. Never mind that she had her own car, her own license, her own perfectly functional sense of direction. Chad was driving her now because it was safer. "I could reschedule the shop stuff," I offered. "Handle the insurance meeting myself." "No, that's okay. Chad knows all the details already. It'll be smoother if he handles it." Smoother. Right. I lay in bed listening to her type, watching the blue light dance across her face, and wondered when exactly my wife had decided that our best friend was better equipped to handle her problems than her husband was. The typing stopped around 12:30. Jenna plugged her phone into the charger on her nightstand, screen down, and rolled over to face away from me. "Good night, Nick. Good night." But I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathe, thinking about phone glows and insurance paperwork, and the way she'd started buying new underwear that I never saw her wear, thinking about how Chad's wife Beth had mentioned at the grocery store last week that Chad was working a lot of late nights lately, helping friends with various crises and emergencies. Thinking about how friends don't usually need 40-minute phone conversations to discuss insurance claims. And thinking about how jealousy might just be love's way of telling you to pay attention. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a car horn in our driveway. Not Jenna's Honda, which was sitting right where she'd parked it the night before. This was the distinctive double beep of Chad's BMW. "That's my ride," Jenna called from the bathroom, where she was applying makeup with the kind of precision usually reserved for magazine photo shoots. "Your ride to where?" "The insurance meeting, remember? Chad's picking me up." I checked my phone. 7:45 a.m. "The meeting you said was Thursday morning?" "It got moved up. Chad texted me this morning." Of course he did. Chad and his mysteriously flexible schedule, always available to swoop in and rescue Jenna from the terrible inconvenience of driving herself places. I walked to the bedroom window and watched Chad climb out of his BMW. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a week, his hair styled with the kind of product that promised to make middle-aged real estate agents look like movie stars. He checked his reflection in his side mirror, adjusted his tie, and headed toward our front door with the confident stride of a man who belonged here. "You know, I still don't understand why you need Chad to drive you everywhere," I said, watching Jenna pack her purse with the same care she used to reserve for vacation trips. "You've been driving yourself to appointments for 12 years. I told you, it's easier this way. Chad knows the insurance people, he knows the process. Why make it more complicated than it needs to be?" "Because you're a grown woman who's perfectly capable of handling her own business?" She stopped packing and looked at me with that patient expression again. "Nick, we've talked about this. Chad is helping me because he's good at this stuff and because he cares about our family. Why can't you just be grateful instead of making everything into a territorial pissing contest?" Territorial pissing contest. That was a new one. The doorbell rang. "That's him," Jenna said, grabbing her purse and heading for the stairs. "I'll probably be gone most of the morning. The insurance office is in Newton, and Chad wants to take me to lunch afterward to debrief." Debrief. Like she was returning from a military operation instead of filing paperwork about a minor fender bender. I followed her downstairs and watched through the front window as she climbed into Chad's passenger seat. They were both laughing about something before she'd even closed the door. Chad leaned over to say something that made her laugh even harder, his hand resting on her shoulder for just a moment longer than necessary. Then they drove away, leaving me standing in my own driveway, wondering when exactly I'd become a spectator in my own marriage. At the shop, Frank was already elbow-deep in the Mustang's engine bay, but he looked up when I walked in. "You look like shit," he said with his usual diplomatic charm. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." Coffee's fresh, and I talked to my brother-in-law about that surveillance stuff. We sat in my office, drinking coffee that could strip paint and talking about GPS tracking systems like we were discussing the weather. "The thing about modern smartphones," Frank explained, "is that they're basically tracking devices that happen to make phone calls. If you've got access to someone's account, you can see exactly where they are, where they've been, how long they stayed there." Hypothetically speaking. "Of course. Hypothetically." Frank grinned. "My brother-in-law says most people don't even realize how much information their phones are broadcasting. Location data, text message logs, call duration records. It's all there if you know where to look. And if you happen to be, say, the account holder on a family plan, then hypothetically you'd have access to everything. Account holder privileges are pretty comprehensive." I thought about Jenna's phone, which had been on our family plan since we got married. I'd been paying the bills, managing the account, handling all the technical stuff because Jenna claimed technology gave her headaches. Hypothetically, how would someone go about accessing that information? Frank pulled out his phone and showed me a website. Account login, family tracking dashboard. Most carriers have them now, marketed as a safety feature for parents who want to keep track of their kids, or husbands who want to keep track of wives who've suddenly developed an aversion to driving themselves places. "Purely hypothetical," I said. "Absolutely. Just like it would be purely hypothetical if someone wanted to, say, check whether their spouse was actually going to insurance meetings or maybe making other stops along the way." We spent the rest of the morning working on the Mustang, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept thinking about Chad's hand on Jenna's shoulder, about the way they'd been laughing before she'd even settled into her seat, about how comfortable they looked together, about how she'd been taking longer and longer to come home from these mysterious errands that always seemed to require Chad's expertise. At lunch, I drove home to grab a sandwich and check the mail. Jenna's Honda was still in the driveway, which meant she was still out with Chad, still handling insurance business that apparently required a full day of attention. I sat at my kitchen table, eating a turkey sandwich and staring at my laptop screen. The carrier's website was open in front of me, the family tracking dashboard just a few clicks away. Frank was right. It was all there. Location history, call logs, text message timestamps, 12 years of marriage, and I'd never once felt the need to check up on my wife's movements. But 12 years of marriage, and she'd never once needed a best friend to drive her everywhere she needed to go. I clicked the login button and entered our account information. The dashboard loaded, showing 2 phones on our family plan. Mine, currently located at our home address, and Jenna's, currently located at a boutique hotel 90 miles away in the Berkshires. Not an insurance office in Newton, not a restaurant where they might be debriefing over lunch. A hotel? I clicked on the location history and watched the day's journey unfold like a digital breadcrumb trail. Jenna's phone had left our house at 7:50 a.m., traveled directly to Chad's house, stayed there for 15 minutes, then headed west toward the Massachusetts Turnpike. No stops at any insurance offices, no detours through Newton, just a straight shot to the Whispering Pines Inn, where according to the timestamp they'd arrived at 10:30 a.m. and hadn't moved since. I Googled the hotel. Boutique property, romantic getaways, couples packages. The kind of place you took someone when you wanted privacy and didn't care about the cost. The kind of place you definitely didn't take your best friend's wife to discuss insurance claims. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Meeting running long. Chad's taking me to dinner too. Don't wait up. Love you. Love you. I stared at those 2 words, sent from a hotel room 90 miles away, and wondered if she'd typed them before or after whatever she and Chad were doing in their romantic boutique getaway. Then I closed the laptop, grabbed my keys, and headed back to the shop. Frank took one look at my face and didn't ask any questions. But that evening, as I sat alone in our house, eating leftover pizza and watching Jenna's location dot remain stationary at the Whispering Pines Inn, I started making plans. Because if my wife wanted to play games with our best friend, I was going to make sure I knew all the rules. 3 days later, I found the train tickets. It was a Thursday evening, and Jenna was upstairs taking one of her increasingly frequent long showers. I was in our home office, supposedly paying bills, but really just trying to make sense of the credit card statements that had been showing charges I didn't recognize. Charges from restaurants I'd never been to. Charges from stores that sold lingerie I'd never seen. Charges from a florist who apparently delivered flowers to our house while I was at work. Flowers that had mysteriously disappeared before I got home. I was cross-referencing the charges with dates when I accidentally knocked over a stack of Jenna's mail. As I bent to pick up the scattered envelopes, a confirmation email printout fluttered to the floor. Amtrak reservation confirmation. 2 tickets on the Lakeshore Limited from Boston to Albany, departing Friday morning. First-class accommodations. 2 tickets, both in Jenna's name. I read the confirmation 3 times, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Tomorrow was Friday. Jenna had mentioned a girls' weekend, a spa trip with her friend Lizzie to celebrate Lizzie's birthday. She'd been talking about it for weeks, how much she needed the relaxation, how excited she was to have some girl time. But this wasn't a reservation for 2 women going to a spa. This was a reservation for 2 people going to Albany, where according to the attached hotel confirmation, they'd be staying at the Mansion Hill Inn in a deluxe suite with a king-sized bed and a romantic fireplace. The reservation was under Jenna's name only, but there were definitely 2 train tickets. I heard the shower shut off upstairs. Quickly, I photographed the confirmations with my phone, then arranged the papers exactly as I'd found them. By the time Jenna came downstairs in her robe, I was back at the computer, innocently scrolling through our checking account. "How are the finances looking?" she asked, toweling her hair. "Fine, same as always." I kept my voice neutral. "Hey, what time does your train leave tomorrow?" 10:15. Lizzie's picking me up at 9:30. She didn't miss a beat, didn't show any sign that she was lying through her teeth. We're both so excited. It feels like forever since we've had proper girl time. "That's great. You deserve a break." I turned to look at her. "Where did you say you were going again?" "The Berkshires. That spa Lizzie found online. Very exclusive, very relaxing." She smiled, the same smile she'd been giving me for 12 years. "I'll probably be pretty tired when I get back Sunday, but it'll be worth it." The Berkshires. Not Albany. And definitely not the Mansion Hill Inn, which according to its website specialized in romantic getaways for couples, not spa treatments for stressed-out women. "Sounds perfect," I said. "Tell Lizzie I said happy birthday." I will. She kissed the top of my head and headed back upstairs to pack. I listened to her moving around our bedroom, opening drawers, humming softly to herself. The same woman who'd shared my bed for 12 years, who knew how I liked my coffee and remembered to record my favorite shows, who'd cried when her father died and held my hand through my mother's cancer treatment. The same woman who was planning to spend the weekend in a romantic hotel suite with our best friend and who was lying to my face about it with the practiced ease of a professional. I waited until she was asleep, then crept back down to the office and opened the family tracking app on my phone. Tomorrow, I'd be able to watch her location in real time. I'd know exactly where she went, how long she stayed there, and whether she was really with Lizzie or with someone else entirely. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The next morning, Jenna was up early, packing her overnight bag with the kind of care she usually reserved for business trips. I watched from the bedroom doorway as she folded lingerie I'd never seen before, black lace and silk that definitely hadn't come from Target. New underwear? I asked casually. She glanced up, not even slightly embarrassed. Lizzie convinced me to splurge a little. She said spa weekends are about feeling good about yourself. Makes sense. She packed a bottle of perfume I didn't recognize, makeup that looked more expensive than her usual drugstore brands, and a dress that still had tags on it. You're really going all out for this spa weekend. Well, it's Lizzie's birthday. I want to look nice for dinner. She zipped up the bag and set it by the bedroom door. Besides, when's the last time I bought myself something pretty? When's the last time you wore something pretty for me? I thought, but didn't say. At 9:20, a car honked in our driveway. But it wasn't Lizzie's silver Prius, it was Chad's BMW. That's weird, Jenna said, looking out the window. Chad's here instead of Lizzie. She grabbed her phone and pretended to check her messages. Oh, Lizzie's car wouldn't start. Chad offered to give me a ride to the station. Of course he did. Chad, always ready to step in and save the day. Chad, who apparently had nothing better to do on a Friday morning than chauffeur other men's wives to train stations. I walked Jenna to the front door and watched Chad get out of his car. He was dressed casually, jeans and a polo shirt, but he'd clearly put effort into his appearance. His hair was perfect, his smile was bright, and he was carrying a travel bag that looked suspiciously similar to Jenna's. Hey, Nick, he said, walking up our front steps. Sorry about the last-minute change. Lizzie's having car trouble, so I'm playing taxi driver. No problem. Thanks for helping out. That's what friends are for, right? He grinned and took Jenna's bag. Ready for your girls' weekend? So ready, Jenna said, kissing my cheek. I'll call you tonight. I watched them walk to his car, watched him open her door like a gentleman, watched them drive away together. Then I went inside, opened the tracking app on my phone, and settled in to see where my wife's girls' weekend would actually take her. The blue dot representing Jenna's phone moved through town, past Lizzie's house without stopping, and headed straight for the highway. Not toward the Berkshires, where the spa was supposed to be. Toward Albany, where 2 train tickets and a romantic hotel suite were waiting. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. If my wife wanted to take a romantic weekend trip with our best friend, that was her choice. But I was going to make sure I had a front row seat for the show. The drive to Albany took 3 hours. 3 hours of following that blue dot on my phone, 3 hours of rehearsing what I'd say when I found them, 3 hours of my marriage dissolving in real time. I'd called Frank from the road, told him I had a family emergency and wouldn't be in. Frank, being Frank, didn't ask questions. He just said to take care of myself and call if I needed anything. What I needed was a time machine. What I needed was to go back 6 months and pay attention to the warning signs. What I needed was for this to be some kind of elaborate misunderstanding that would make sense once I had all the facts. But the facts were pretty clear. My wife was in Albany with another man, staying in a romantic hotel suite she'd booked under her own name, lying to me about spa treatments and girls' weekends. The Mansion Hill Inn was exactly what its website promised, a restored Victorian mansion that catered to couples looking for privacy and romance. The parking lot was full of expensive cars, and through the tall windows, I could see couples having intimate dinners by candlelight. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, watching the entrance, trying to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to drive home and pretend I'd never seen the train tickets, never checked the location tracking, never discovered that my marriage was a lie. But the bigger part of me, the part that had been feeling crazy for months, that had been told I was paranoid and jealous and possessive, that part needed to see the truth with my own eyes. I walked into the lobby like I belonged there. The desk clerk was a young woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Good afternoon, I said, pulling out my wallet. I'm Nick Harding. My wife Jenna checked in earlier today, and I'm supposed to meet her here. Could you tell me what room she's in? The clerk typed on her computer. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't give out room information for security reasons. I understand, but she's my wife. and I'm supposed to be joining her for our anniversary weekend. I showed her my driver's license with the same last name as the reservation. I just drove 3 hours from Boston, and my phone died, so I can't call her. The clerk hesitated, then looked at my ID again. Room 237, second floor, elevator's right over there. Thank you. The elevator ride felt like it lasted forever. Second floor, turn left. Room 237. I could hear voices through the door. Jenna's laugh, unmistakable and bright, and Chad's deeper voice saying something that made her laugh again. I stood outside that door for a full minute, listening to my wife having fun with another man, and tried to figure out what I was going to say. Then I knocked. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached the door. Who is it? Chad's voice, cautious. Room service, I said, disguising my voice. The door opened, and Chad appeared in a hotel bathrobe, his hair messy, his face flushed. When he saw me, his expression went from confusion to horror in about half a second. Nick, Jesus, what are you... I pushed past him into the room. Jenna was sitting on the bed in a silk nightgown I'd never seen before, a champagne glass in her hand, her face frozen in shock. The room was everything the website had promised. King-sized bed with rumpled sheets, fireplace crackling in the corner, champagne bucket on the nightstand, rose petals scattered across the floor. Surprise, I said. For a moment, nobody moved. We stood there like actors who'd forgotten their lines, waiting for someone to tell us what came next. Then Jenna found her voice. Nick, I can explain. Can you? Because I'm really curious how you're going to explain this. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The rumpled bed, the champagne, the rose petals, Chad in his bathrobe, Jenna in lingerie I'd never seen. Stop, Chad said, reaching for my phone. You can't just, I can't just what? Take pictures of my wife in a hotel room with my best friend? I kept shooting, documenting everything. I can't just gather evidence of adultery? I can't just protect my interests in the divorce that's going to happen? Divorce? Jenna's voice was small. Nick, please, let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. I stopped taking pictures and looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved for 12 years, sitting on a hotel bed in another man's bathrobe, holding champagne, surrounded by rose petals. What does it look like, Jenna? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife lied to me about a spa weekend so she could spend the weekend fucking our best friend in a romantic hotel suite. She flinched like I'd slapped her. It's not like that, Chad said. You haven't what? You're both half naked in a hotel room with champagne and rose petals, but you haven't done anything? You've been texting my wife every night for months, driving her everywhere, and now you're here together, but it's innocent. Nick, please, Jenna said, tears starting to fall. I know how this looks, but we love each other. We didn't mean for this to happen. Love each other. Those 3 words hit me like a physical blow. Not, it was a mistake, or we got carried away, or it didn't mean anything. They loved each other. How long? I asked. Nick, how long have you been fucking my best friend behind my back? Jenna looked at Chad, some kind of silent communication passing between them. 6 months, she whispered. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Half a year of late-night phone calls and mysterious errands, and Chad driving her everywhere because it was safer. Half a year of me feeling crazy and paranoid and jealous while they laughed at my suspicions. And this weekend, this romantic getaway, how long have you been planning this? A month, Chad said. We booked it a month ago. A month ago, when Jenna had first mentioned Lizzie's birthday spa weekend, a month of elaborate planning, of coordinating their stories, of making sure every detail was perfect for their romantic weekend while I sat at home like an idiot, paying for the credit cards they'd used to book it. I looked around the room one more time, taking in all the details. The champagne that I'd probably paid for. The hotel room that was charged to our joint credit card. The lingerie my wife had bought for another man. I'm filing for divorce Monday morning, I said, and I'm sending copies of these pictures to Beth. Chad's face went white. Beth, his wife of 15 years. Beth, who thought he was working late to help friends with various crises. Beth, who had no idea that her husband was spending romantic weekends with other men's wives. You can't, Chad said. You can't destroy my family because of this. I'm not destroying your family. You did that when you decided to fuck my wife. I headed for the door, then turned back. By the way, Jenna, I've been tracking your phone for weeks. I know about all the other times you've been to hotels with Chad. I know about the restaurants, the shopping trips, all of it. So when you're talking to your lawyer, make sure you mention that I have a complete record of your affair. I left them there, sitting in their romantic hotel room, probably trying to figure out how to salvage their respective marriages. But I was done salvaging. I was done being the understanding husband, the trusting friend, the guy who paid the bills while other people enjoyed the benefits. On the drive home, I called my attorney's emergency line and left a message. Then I called Frank. "How'd that family emergency work out?" he asked. "About as well as you'd expect. Think your brother-in-law could help me compile all that location data into something a divorce lawyer could use?" "Absolutely. You okay, man?" "I will be." And for the first time in months, I actually believed it. By Monday morning, I had everything I needed. Frank's brother-in-law had helped me compile months of location data, call logs, and credit card records into a comprehensive timeline of Jenna and Chad's affair. My attorney, Sarah Morrison, reviewed the evidence over coffee and whistled softly. "This is thorough," she said. "GPS data, financial records, photographs. Your wife's attorney is going to advise her to settle quickly and quietly." "What about alimony?" "With evidence of adultery this comprehensive, she'll be lucky to get anything. Massachusetts is a no-fault state, but judges still don't like cheaters, especially when I've been using marital assets to fund their affairs." The emergency hearing was scheduled for Wednesday. I spent Tuesday moving Jenna's belongings out of our house and into storage, changing the locks, and canceling her access to our joint accounts. By Massachusetts law, I couldn't cut her off completely, but I could limit her access until the court sorted things out. She'd been calling and texting nonstop since Albany, alternating between apologies and anger. The apologies claimed she still loved me, that Chad meant nothing, that we could work things out if I just gave her a chance. The angry messages accused me of spying on her, violating her privacy, and being a controlling psychopath. I didn't respond to any of them. Chad had been calling too, leaving voicemails that ranged from defensive to desperate. He wanted to meet, to explain, to work things out like civilized adults. He claimed the affair was over, that he'd made a mistake, that our friendship was too important to throw away over one weekend. I didn't respond to those either. Instead, I drove to Chad's house Tuesday evening and had a conversation with Beth. She answered the door, looking tired and confused. "Nick, what are you doing here? Chad said you and Jenna had some kind of fight, but he was vague about the details. Can I come in? We need to talk." She led me to her living room, where family photos covered every surface. Chad and Beth on their wedding day, Chad coaching their son's little league team, family vacations, Christmas mornings. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, a whole life built together. I hated what I was about to do to her. "Beth, I need to show you something, and I'm sorry, but there's no easy way to do this." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos from Albany. Beth stared at the screen for a long time, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, recognition. "That's Chad," she said quietly. "Yes." "And that's Jenna." "Yes." "In a hotel room. The Mansion Hill Inn in Albany, this past Friday night." She handed the phone back to me, her hands trembling. "Chad told me he was at a sales conference in Boston." He lied. They've been having an affair for at least 6 months, maybe longer. This was just the weekend I finally got proof. Beth stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her back to me. "How long have you known?" "I suspected for about 3 months. The late-night texts, the sudden interest in girls' nights out, the way she'd smile at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, but I didn't have proof until I followed them to Albany." "You followed them?" "Jenna told me she was going to a yoga retreat. Instead, she drove to a hotel to spend the weekend with your husband." Beth turned back to face me, and I saw tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know the truth. Because I would have wanted someone to tell me before I wasted months pretending everything was fine." "Does Chad know you're here?" "No. He's been trying to call me, but I haven't answered. I wanted to talk to you first." She sank back onto the couch, looking smaller somehow. "The kids. Oh God, the kids." "I'm sorry, Beth. I really am." "Where's Chad now?" "I don't know. Probably at work, or maybe holed up somewhere trying to figure out how to spin this." Beth wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "Show me everything." I spent the next hour showing her the photos, the GPS tracking data, the hotel receipts I'd obtained, the timeline I'd constructed. Beth absorbed it all with an eerie calm, asking questions, taking notes, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. 6 months, she said finally. Maybe longer. All those work dinners and client meetings. All those weekends he had to travel. I believed every word. So did I. "What are you going to do?" "I filed for divorce yesterday. Emergency hearing on Wednesday to establish temporary orders." "Fast." "My lawyer advised moving quickly before Jenna could drain accounts or hide assets." Beth nodded slowly. Smart. I should probably do the same. I can give you my lawyer's contact information if you want. She's sharp. I'd appreciate that. Beth looked around her living room at all those family photos documenting a marriage that had apparently been a lie. 15 years, 2 children, a mortgage, retirement accounts, college funds, and he threw it all away for what? A few hotel weekends? I've been asking myself the same question. Do you have an answer? Not one that makes any sense. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Beth's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and showed me Chad calling. Don't answer, I said. Not until you've talked to a lawyer. What if he's trying to warn me that you're here? Then let him wonder. Let him worry about what you know and what you're planning. Beth declined the call and set her phone face down on the coffee table. You're right. I need to think strategically, not emotionally. That's exactly what my lawyer told me. Nick, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you okay? I mean, really okay? I thought about that. No, but I will be, eventually. How can you be so calm? I'm not calm, I'm furious. But I'm channeling that fury into making sure Jenna doesn't get to walk away from this marriage with half of everything I've worked for while she was busy sleeping with my best friend. Beth smiled grimly. That's fair. You should do the same. I intend to. She stood up and walked me to the door. Nick, thank you for telling me. I know this couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, but you deserve to know. Will you send me copies of everything? The photos, the evidence, all of it? I'll email it tonight. And your lawyer's information? That too. Beth opened the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I always thought you and Jenna were solid. I envied what you had. So did I said. Turns out we were both wrong. I walked to my truck and drove away, watching in my rearview mirror as Beth stood in her doorway, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling a lawyer of her own. By the time I got home, I had 3 new voicemails from Chad and 7 texts from Jenna. I deleted them all without listening or reading. My lawyer called at 8 p.m. Just got an interesting email from a Beth Morrison. Says you referred her? Chad's wife. I told her what was going on. Smart move. If both spouses file simultaneously, it puts pressure on both cheaters and makes coordination between them more difficult. That was the idea. She's meeting with me tomorrow morning, first thing. By tomorrow afternoon, Chad Morrison is going to realize his life just got very complicated. Good. How are you holding up, Nick? I'm tired, angry, ready for this to be over. It's just beginning, she warned. But we'll get through it. Wednesday's hearing will set the tone for everything that follows. Make sure you're there early, dressed professionally, and keep your emotions in check. Judges respond well to the wronged spouse who maintains dignity. I'll be there. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold. I put on my best suit, reviewed my notes one more time, and drove to the courthouse. Jenna was already there with her hastily retained lawyer, a young guy who looked fresh out of law school. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, her makeup smudged. She tried to catch my eye as I walked past, but I kept my gaze forward. The hearing itself was mercifully brief. She handed my phone back and sat down heavily on her couch. How long? According to Jenna, 6 months, but based on the evidence I've gathered, probably longer. I gave her copies of everything. The location data, the credit card records, the hotel receipts. She looked through it all with the methodical attention of someone trying to make sense of her life falling apart. He's been working late, she said. All those evenings helping friends with emergencies. All those weekend appointments with difficult clients. I'm sorry, Beth. I really am. Are you filing for divorce? Yes, tomorrow. She nodded. I'll probably do the same. The kids deserve better than this. I left her there with the evidence and drove home to my empty house. It felt strange, being alone in a space that had been shared for so long. But it also felt clean, like I'd finally stopped breathing poisoned air. The hearing Wednesday morning was brief and brutal. Jenna showed up with a lawyer who clearly wished he was anywhere else. Sarah presented our evidence methodically. The photos, the location data, the financial records showing Chad and Jenna's affair had been funded with marital assets. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed everything with obvious distaste. Mrs. Harding, she said, do you dispute any of this evidence? Jenna's lawyer whispered something in her ear. She shook her head. No, Your Honor. Very well. Mr. Harding, you're requesting exclusive use of the marital home, freezing of joint assets, and temporary alimony denial based on adultery. Yes, Your Honor. Granted. Mrs. Harding, you have 48 hours to remove any remaining personal belongings from the marital home. All joint accounts are frozen pending final divorce proceedings. Given the evidence of adultery using marital funds, I'm denying temporary alimony. We'll schedule a final hearing for next month." Jenna started crying. Her lawyer put a hand on her shoulder and whispered something about appeals and settlements. But I was already walking out of the courthouse, feeling lighter than I had in months. That afternoon, Chad showed up at my shop. Frank took one look at him and found urgent business in the back office. "Nick, we need to talk." "No, we don't. Come on, man. We've been friends for 8 years. Don't let this destroy everything." I looked up from the engine I was working on. Chad looked terrible. Unshaven, rumpled clothes, dark circles under his eyes. Beth had probably kicked him out, and he was learning what it felt like to lose everything for a few months of hotel room fun. "We stopped being friends the first time you put your hands on my wife. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We didn't plan it. It just developed. Over 6 months. 6 months of planning hotel trips and lying to my face and making me feel crazy for noticing that something was wrong." I put down my wrench and faced him. "You were in my wedding, Chad. You helped me move furniture. You cried on my shoulder when your dad died." I know, and I'm sorry. But Nick, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. You wanted something that belonged to me, so you took it. You didn't care what it would do to me or to Beth or to your kids. You just took what you wanted and figured you'd deal with the consequences later. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple." I picked up my wrench again. "Now get out of my shop before I do something we'll both regret." He stood there for another minute, maybe hoping I'd change my mind, maybe trying to think of something else to say. Then he turned and walked away. Frank emerged from the back office once Chad's car was gone. "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." And I was. For the first time in months, I was exactly where I needed to be. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Jenna got nothing, no alimony, no share of the house, no claim to my business. The judge made it clear that adultery had consequences, especially when the cheating spouse had used marital funds to finance their affair. Chad and Beth's divorce was messier. She got the house, primary custody of the kids, and half his real estate commissions. Chad moved into a studio apartment across town and started driving a 10-year-old Honda instead of his BMW. I heard through the neighborhood gossip network that he and Jenna had tried to make their relationship work after both divorces were final. But apparently, relationships built on lies and betrayal don't have much staying power when there's no longer any thrill of secrecy involved. They lasted 3 months before Jenna moved back to her hometown in Ohio, and Chad started dating a 25-year-old receptionist from his real estate office. Me? I kept the house, kept the business, and started sleeping through the night again. Frank hired his nephew to help with the increased workload, and we expanded into custom motorcycle restoration. Business was good, life was quiet, and I was content. 6 months after the divorce, I was working late in the shop when I heard a car pull into the parking lot. Through the window, I saw Jenna getting out of a rental car. She looked different, thinner, older, tired in a way that went deeper than just lack of sleep. She knocked on the shop door, and after a moment's hesitation, I let her in. "Hello, Nick." "Jenna." We stood there awkwardly, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the ghosts of our shared past. "I was in town visiting my mother," she said. "I thought maybe we could talk." "About what?" "About us. About what happened. About whether there's any chance—" "No." The word came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't take it back. "Nick, please. I know I made mistakes, but—" "Mistakes?" I put down the wrench I'd been holding. "Jenna, you had a 6-month affair with my best friend. You lied to my face every day for half a year. You used our money to pay for hotel rooms where you fucked another man. Those weren't mistakes. Those were choices." I know, and I've regretted them every day since. Chad and I were not together anymore. It was never real, what we had. It was just what? Just exciting? Just fun? Just something to do while your boring husband was working to pay for your lifestyle? She started crying. "It wasn't like that. You have to believe me, it wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" "I don't know. I was confused, I was unhappy, I felt like we were just going through the motions. Chad paid attention to me, he made me feel special, and I made a terrible mistake." I looked at her. This woman I'd loved for 12 years. This woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my bank account, and felt nothing but exhaustion. "You know what the worst part was?" I said. "Not the affair itself. Not even the lying. The worst part was how you made me feel crazy for noticing. Every time I asked questions, every time I pointed out inconsistencies, you told me I was being paranoid and jealous and possessive. You made me doubt my own instincts, my own sanity. I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't give me back the year of my life I spent feeling like I was losing my mind. Sorry doesn't make me trust you again." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "So, that's it? 12 years of marriage, and you won't even consider trying to work things out?" 12 years of marriage, and you threw it away for 6 months of hotel sex with my best friend. You made your choice, Jenna. Now you get to live with the consequences." She stood there for another minute, maybe hoping I'd change my mind, maybe trying to think of something else to say. Then she turned and walked toward the door. "I really did love you," she said without turning around. "I know," I replied. "That's what makes this so sad." She left, and I went back to work on the motorcycle I'd been restoring. A 1969 Harley-Davidson that someone had abused and abandoned, but that still had good bones underneath all the damage. Some things could be restored, some things could be made better than they were before, if you were willing to put in the work and had the patience to do it right. And some things were just too broken to fix. I finished the Harley 3 weeks later. It was beautiful. Chrome gleaming, engine purring, every detail perfect. The owner picked it up on a Saturday morning, paid in cash, and rode away with a smile that stretched from ear to ear. That afternoon, I closed the shop early and drove to the coast. I sat on a bench overlooking the ocean, watching the waves roll in and thinking about second chances and new beginnings and the difference between being alone and being lonely. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Beer and barbecue at my place tomorrow. Bring yourself and an appetite." I texted back, "I'll be there." Then I put my phone away and watched the sun set over the water, feeling grateful for friends who didn't lie, work that meant something, and the simple pleasure of sleeping peacefully in my own bed. Some stories end with reconciliation and forgiveness. Some end with dramatic confrontations and explosive revenge. This one ended with quiet satisfaction and the knowledge that I'd finally stopped letting other people define my worth. It was enough.